January 13th, 1903, Volume 4. Luisa sees the Most Holy Trinity. The evil of adulations. As I was in my usual state, I seemed to see the Most Holy Trinity. They were looking at one another, and in those gazes their beauty was so great that they would remain ecstatic at the mere gazing upon one another. In this state they overflowed with love, and were as though stirred by that love to then become more intensely ecstatic. So all of their good and delight was comprised within themselves, and the whole of their eternal life, beatitude, and exercise was enclosed in this word alone, love. And the whole beatitude of the saints was formed by this perfect operating of the Most Holy Trinity. While I was seeing this, the Son assumed the form of the crucified, and coming out from their midst, he came to me, sharing with me the pains of the crucifixion. And while remaining with me, he brought himself once again into their midst, and offered his sufferings and mine, satisfying for the love that all creatures owed them. Who can say their delight, and how satisfied they were by the offering of the Son? It seemed that, since in creating the creatures nothing had come out of their interior but contained flames of love, so much so that, in order to give vent to this love, they began to create many other images of themselves. Only when they receive what they have given are they then satisfied. That is, love they gave, love they want. So the most awful affront is to not love them. Yet, O God, 3 times holy, who is there that loves you? After this they disappeared, but who can say what I understood? My mind got lost, and my tongue is unable to articulate a word. Then after a little while, blessed Jesus came back, with his face covered with spit and with mud, and he said to me, "My daughter, praises, adulations, are spit and mud that dirty and smear the soul, and blind her mind, so as to prevent her from knowing who she really is, especially if they do not start from the truth. In fact, if they start from the truth and the person is worthy of praises, knowing the truth, she will give the glory to me. But if they start from falsehood, they drive the soul to such excess that she will confirm herself more in evil." January 13th, 1907, Volume 7. Jesus wanted to suffer in his humanity in order to redo the human nature. Continuing in my usual state, I saw my blessed Jesus flashing by, and he told me, "My daughter, how much I love souls." Listen, the human nature was corrupted, humiliated, without hope of glory and of resurgence, and I wanted to suffer all humiliations in my humanity. In a special way I wanted to be stripped, scourged, and let my flesh fall off in shreds under the scourges, almost undoing my humanity, in order to redo the humanity of creatures, and to make it rise again full of life, of honor, and of glory, to eternal life. What more could I do which I have not done? January 13th, 1927, Volume 20. Jesus prays Luisa to write. How his word is happiness. How one who lives in the divine will is considered as one from the celestial fatherland. The soul prays together with the whole creation. How Jesus promises her that everything will be granted to her. Continuing with a fever, I could manage to write with such difficulty that I had decided to no longer write, until I would find myself in the condition of being able to do it with less difficulty. Also, to be able to write more extensively that which blessed Jesus manifests to his little daughter. In fact, because of the hardship, I try to restrict as much as I can. Now, while I was not thinking at all about writing, given my decision, my always lovable Jesus moved in my interior, and as though praying me, told me, "My daughter, write a little bit. I am content with little rather than nothing. Then when you can, you will write more. And in the little you will write, I will help you. I will not leave you alone. And when I see that you cannot go on, I myself will say, enough, because I love you very much, and also your nature, since that is mine too. And I do not want you to tire yourself beyond your strengths. But do not take away from me this pleasure of maintaining the ever-new correspondence of writing that which I want to say to you. You know that in the whole world there is not one place in which I can share my happinesses and receive return for them. So the place of my happiness in the world is you. And this happiness of mine is formed by my speaking. When I can speak with a creature, make myself understood, it is happiness for me, and full and superabundant happiness for the one who listens to me. More so, since in speaking with you, because my will is in you, I speak to you in my will, not outside of it, and I am sure of being understood. And even more so, since in speaking to you about my will, I feel in you the happiness of my kingdom, the echo of the happiness of the celestial fatherland. Do you know, my daughter, what would happen? Since I keep you in the supreme Fiat, I look at you as someone from my celestial fatherland. What would you say if someone who already lives in heaven did not want to receive my new joys, which are released naturally from my womb, to make all the blessed happy? In fact, it is in my nature to give ever new beatitudes. This someone would be a hindrance to my happiness. She would close in my womb the joys which I want to release. So it would happen with you. You would be a hindrance to my happiness, to the ever-new joys which my will possesses. More so, since I feel happier when I make the little daughter of my will happier, who finds herself in the low exile only because of us, for nothing else, to give us field in order to form our kingdom in the midst of creatures, and to restore for us the rights and the glory of the work of the whole creation. Do you think that my heart can tolerate not making my little daughter happy? No, no, it would be the greatest pain for me. Is my word perhaps not the greatest happiness for you? And I, certainly, O Jesus. And if you knew how you make me unhappy when you deprive me of it, how I feel the void of happiness without end, which nothing else, as beautiful and good as it may be, will be able to make up for. And Jesus, therefore, my daughter, while my word makes you happy, I do not want it to remain in the void of yourself alone, but I want it to serve to establish my kingdom. And therefore, as confirmation of my word and of my happiness which comes from me, I want it to be written on paper, also as confirmation of our correspondence. Then after this I began to pray, bringing all creation together with me before the Supreme Majesty, that is, the heavens, the stars, the sun, the sea, in sum, everything, so that my prayer might be animated by all the acts which the Supreme Fiat exercises in all creation. My sweet Jesus placed himself near me, leaning his head against mine, extending his arm around my neck, almost to sustain me. And I said to him, "My love, Jesus, I am not the only one praying you, but together with me there is your will operating in the whole creation, praying for the coming of your kingdom. It itself wants its rights, all whole and complete, over everyone and everything. And only with the coming of the kingdom of the supreme Fiat upon earth will all of its rights be given back to it. Listen, O Jesus, how touching is the voice of your Fiat in the whole azure of the heavens. How eloquent it is in the sun. How attractive and strong it is in the sea. Everywhere can your Fiat be heard, resounding, wanting the rights of its kingdom. Oh, please listen to your own Fiat. Listen to your daughter, who, making all of its acts her own, prays you, supplicates you, that your kingdom come. And even though I am just newly born, I too want my rights. And do you know, O Jesus, what these are? That I give back to your will all the glory and the honor, as if no one had offended it, as if everyone had fulfilled it, adored it, and loved it. If I am its daughter, I want that its rights be given back to it, and I want also that my first father Adam be given back the honor as if he had never withdrawn from your will. And my most sweet Jesus, all moved, said to me, "To my little daughter, who takes to heart so much the rights of my divine Fiat, and who uses its very power in order to open her way to my heart, everything will be granted. How not to content you, my daughter? To you everything will be given. Even more, we will adjust together that which regards my will and that which regards the creatures. Aren't you happy? Look, my daughter, from the moment my will entered the field in creation, it has always been firm and unshakable in doing good, in spite of the many moodinesses and offenses of the creatures. Triumphing over all, it has followed its usual course, doing good always. See, in order to make the creature ascend again into the firmness, into the perennial good, into the unshakability of my will, I want to establish my kingdom in their midst. See, then, at what point I have placed you, in the firmness and unshakability of the Fiat, to allow you to extend this kingdom of mine within it. And just as my will triumphs over everything with its firmness, so will you triumph over everything with its firmness and in the unshakability of its acts, and you will reorder the divine order between the two wills. The divine will be reintegrated in its glory, and the human will place itself once again in the order established by God. After I wrote this, I was thinking to myself that what is written above is not necessary. More so since, continuing to be feverish, I write with difficulty, and I write just a little to make Jesus content. And my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, in order to live in my will, the soul must ascend, and in order to ascend in it, she must leave that which does not belong to my will. She must leave her miserable rags, her vulgar habits, her vile foods, her miseries. Everything she must leave in order to make use of the royal garment of divine habits, of precious and nourishing foods, of infinite riches, in sum, of everything that belongs to my will. What you have written serves you for now. It serves the kingdom of the supreme Fiat. Then it will be the rule for those who must live in it, how they must use all of the operating acts of my will in order to maintain themselves within the boundaries of my kingdom. Therefore, that which to you does not seem to be necessary is necessary for the formation of my supreme kingdom." January 13th, 1928, Volume 23. how God centralized everything in man in creating him, and how in the history of creation he now comes back to storm it, and centralizes the first act of creation in one creature from their stock, to form the kingdom of his will. I continue my abandonment in the divine volition, with the almost continuous torment of the privation of my sweet Jesus. Oh God, what terrible pain! Oh, how I miss my past, his sweet smile, his affectionate kisses, the gentleness of his voice, his enchanting and enrapturing beauty, his chaste embraces, his tender heartbeats that, with so much love, he let palpitate within mine, divinizing me and transforming his life into myself. Each act of Jesus, each word and each gaze were as many more paradises that he formed in his little daughter. And now, as I remember them, they are wounds, sharp darts, burning arrows of intense sorrow, of martyrdom, and of continuous death. But my sorrow is not all here. Maybe grieving would have been a relief, because my grief would have told me in clear notes that my love toward him whom I loved and who had loved me so much formed my torment. But not even this is conceded to me, because as the wounds are about to bleed, the darts to shoot, the arrows to burn me, the light of the holy divine volition flows in them, and eclipsing all the intensity of my hard martyrdom, it makes peace, happiness, beneficial dew flow over my poor soul. So I cannot even have the good of grieving over a loss so great. Oh, if I could grieve as before, I believe that my highest good, Jesus, would not take so long to come back. But this is not in my power. I am at the mercy of the divine Fiat, that leaves not one void in me, and wants to lord even over my sorrow of the privation of Jesus. Now, while I was swimming in the two seas, the sorrow of being without Jesus, and the sea of the light of the divine volition, such that it seemed that one was fused in the other, I continued my round in it, and I paused at the creation of man. And my sweet Jesus, just barely moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, in creating man, our divinity centralized everything in him. As if we had done nothing in all the rest of creation, we put everything aside and occupied ourselves only with him. Our love reached the excess. We looked and looked at him over and over again to see whether he was beautiful, whether our beauty would shine forth in him. Our divine being poured like pouring rain over him, and do you know what it poured? Sanctity, light, wisdom, grace, love, beauty, strength. And while we unloaded ourselves over him, our gazes were fixed upon man to see whether all our qualities were centralized in him in such a way that he was to lack nothing in order for us to love him and be loved in return. So much so that his beauty enraptured us, his love invested us, all of our qualities placed in him echoed in our divine being, bound us and brought us to him. What a solemn time! What an unforgettable point! What ardor of love was the creation of man! All of our divine qualities overflowed outside and celebrated his creation. And as the fulfillment of our feast, joy and happiness, shaken by our own love, we looked at the machine of the whole universe, and we gave him everything as gift, constituting him king of all created things, so as to be able to say to ourselves and to him, "Dominating kings are we. King and dominating is the work of our hands. the dear Son delivered in the outpouring of our love. It would have been unseemly and not decorous for us to make of our Son a servant dissimilar to us in likeness and in dominion. Would it perhaps not be unseemly and unworthy of a king to make of his Son a vile servant, putting him out of his royal palace in a poor hovel? This king would deserve the blame of all, and would be held not as father and king, but as a tyrant. Much more so, since our newborn came out from within the depths of our divine love, and therefore we wanted the decorum and the imprint of royalty in our work. Now, this love of ours was broken by man, and by withdrawing from our divine will, he himself removed from himself the imprint of royalty and the insignia of king. However, on our part nothing changed, and we persisted in our will of making of the work of our hands the Son king, not servant. And therefore in the whole history of creation we now come back to storm it, and to the fulfillment of our will, and we call one from their stock, and putting every one aside, as if no one else existed, we renew the solemnity of the creation of the first man. The ardor of our love forms huge waves, and makes us see everything as love, and placing this creature in the midst of these waves, even though our all-seeingness sees everything, we put everything aside, and with this one we renew the great prodigy of the first act of creation. We did so with the sovereign queen, and since she did not break our love and preserved the life of our will within herself, she has the title and the right of queen. Oh, how our love rejoices and makes feast in seeing her the first queen of the work of our creative hands. But our love is not content with having only one queen, nor was this our will in creation. And therefore, pouring itself out very strongly and releasing its contained waves, our love calls this creature, and centralizes in her the whole work of creation. It pours upon her like pouring rain. It overflows with its divine qualities, in order to have the second daughter queen, to make her form the foundations of the kingdom of our will, so as to be able to have the retinue of our children, all kings and queens. This is why I am putting everything aside to operate in you the first act of creation. My love forms the enchantment for me, that while I look upon others, it makes me keep my gaze fixed on you, and it makes me pour everything that is needed in order for me to form the kingdom of my will in you. I act like a father who, having provided for his other children to get settled, and having to do so for another one, does not think either about the previous ones or about those whom he is to fix later, but putting everything else aside, he thinks only of the one he is about to settle. And if this son is good, and he whom he chose is worthy of him, the father does not mind how much he spends. He endows him with greater riches. He prepares a sumptuous house for him. In sum, he puts out all his paternal love. So I do when it comes to realizing the purpose of creation, which is the kingdom of my will in the midst of creatures. For she whom I call to be the first, I hold nothing back. I centralize everything in her, knowing that everything will be inherited by those who will follow her. January 13th, 1929, Volume 25, The Prophets, How the Kingdom of Redemption and that of the Fiat Hold Hands. Necessity that what regards the kingdom of the divine will be known. I was continuing my round in the acts of the divine fiat, and as I reached the point in which I would accompany the prophets when the divine volition manifested itself to them, the how and the when of the coming of the future Redeemer, And the prophets longed for him with tears, prayers, and penances, making everything they did my own, because all this was the fruits of the eternal divine fiat. I offered it in order to impetrate its kingdom upon earth. But while I was doing this, my sweet Jesus moving in my interior told me, "My daughter, when a good is universal and must and can bring good to all, it is necessary that entire peoples, and if not everyone, a great part, know the good that they must receive, and with prayers, sighs, desires, and works, they impetrate a good so great, in such a way that first the good they want is conceived in their minds, sighs, desires, works, and even in their hearts, and then is the good that they longed for given to them in reality. When a good that must be received is universal, it takes the strength of a people to impetrate it. On the other hand, when it is individual or local, one can be enough to obtain the intent. Therefore, before coming upon earth and being conceived in the womb of the sovereign Queen of Heaven, I can say that I was conceived in the minds of the prophets, and I confirmed and gave value to this sort of conception in them through my manifestations of the when and the how I was to come upon earth in order to redeem mankind. And the prophets, faithful executors of my manifestations, acted as trumpeters, manifesting to the peoples, with their words, what I had manifested about my coming upon earth. And conceiving me in their words, they made the news that the word wanted to come upon earth fly from mouth to mouth. And by this not only was I conceived in the word of the prophets, but I remained conceived also in the word of the people, in such a way that all talked about it, and prayed, and longed for the future Redeemer. And when the news of my coming upon earth was diffused among the peoples, and almost an entire people, with the prophets at the head of it, prayed and longed for with tears and penances, only then, being as though conceived in their wills, I let the Queen come to life, in whom I was to conceive in reality, so as to make my entrance into a people that had been longing for me and desiring me for 40 centuries. What a crime would the prophets not have committed had they concealed, hidden within themselves, my manifestations about my coming? They would have prevented my conception in the minds, in the prayers, words, and works of the people, a necessary condition for God's being able to concede a universal good, which was my coming upon earth. Now, my daughter, the kingdom of redemption and the kingdom of my divine fiat hold hands, and since it is also a universal good, such that if they want it so, all can enter into it, it is necessary that many know the news about it, and that it be conceived in the minds, in the words, in the works, and hearts of many, so that through prayers, desires, and a holier life, they may dispose themselves to receive the kingdom of my divine will into their midst. If the news is not divulged, my manifestations will not act as trumpeters, nor will the knowledges about my divine fiat fly from mouth to mouth, forming the conception of it in the minds, prayers, sighs, and desires of creatures. My divine volition will not make its triumphant entrance of coming to reign upon earth. How necessary it is that the knowledges about my fiat be known. Not only this, but that it be made known that my divine will already wants to come to reign on earth as it does in heaven into the midst of creatures. And it is to the priests, as to new prophets, through the word as well as through writing and through works, that the task is given of acting as trumpeters in order to make known what regards my divine fiat. Nor would their crime be lesser than that of the prophets, had these hidden my redemption, if they do not occupy themselves as much as they can with what regards my divine will, they themselves would be the cause of a good so great, being neither known nor received by creatures. And to suffocate the kingdom of my divine will, to keep suspended a good so great, such that there is no other similar to it, is this perhaps not a crime? Therefore I recommend to you, on your part, do not omit anything, and pray for those who must occupy themselves with making known a good so great. Then he added with a more tender and afflicted tone, My daughter, this was the purpose for which I permitted the necessity of the coming of the priest, that you might deposit in them, as a sacred deposit, all the truths that I have spoken to you about my divine fiat, and that they be attentive and the faithful executors of what I want. That is, that they make the kingdom of my divine will known. Be certain that I would not have permitted their coming, if not for the purpose of fulfilling my great designs over the destiny of the human family. And just as in the kingdom of redemption I left my queen mamma in the midst of the apostles, so that together with her, helped and guided by her, they might give start to the kingdom of redemption, because the sovereign queen of heaven knew more than all of the apostles. She was the most interested. It can be said that she kept it formed within her maternal heart, and therefore she could very well instruct the apostles in the doubts, in the way, in the circumstances. She was the true sun in their midst, and one word of hers was enough for my apostles to feel strong, illuminated, and fortified. In the same way, for the kingdom of my divine fiat, having placed in you the deposit of it, I keep you in the exile still, so that the priests might draw from you, as from a new mother, what can serve as light, as guidance, as help, to give start to making known the kingdom of my divine will. And as I see their little interest, if you knew how much I suffer. Therefore, pray, pray. End of January 13th. Fiat.